harder the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A theist serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul.
Battle buddies.
Battle buddies.
Last night I was like, we watched 12 O'Clock High, and he's like, I've seen it many times. He's obsessed with planes. He builds his own model planes and like puts them in the competitions. He built a replica.
Are they remote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He built a replica of I couldn't tell you what kind of plane it was, but his dad got shot down in Germany and was a POW. Like, came back to the United States.
Was it a bomber, like a B-17 or a B-29?
It was probably B-17.
It might have been a B-25.
That might be. I'll send you some stuff. It's actually really cool. Hey, everybody. Here we are.
Yeah, welcome.
We're doing it. We're doing it live. Welcome to a very special episode of Battle Buddies. Do you want to introduce yourself? You want to say your name?
My name's Mark Wells. I'm actually Kevin's father-in-law, I guess.
Woo!
Is that correct? And they asked me to come on. I'm not sure why, but I'm sure I'll find out here in a minute.
Such a humble man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the first thing that we should get out of the way was last night we were eating some delicious ribs at your house and watching 12 O'Clock High. And he was like, if there's one thing that I want you to remember before this night is over, is that aliens exist and that I've seen a lot of UFOs. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm glad you can confirm that. And then I went and wrote it all over Facebook.
There we go.
Yeah.
That does sound like Mark.
Aliens exist.
Yeah.
That's my bit.
That was really good. That was a really good bit.
Thank you. I was waiting for that all day.
I didn't have a response.
Yeah, I was expecting you to be like, no, aliens do not exist. That's all right, though.
Yeah.
What you got? Give it to us.
I got it. You want my beginning bit?
Kevin's bit. Ready, scene.
Scene. All right. So I'm pretty comfortable with myself, like my masculinity. Like I don't get shook very easily. Like I've been a nerd for a long time. You know, like I am who I am. I'm a man, kind of. Like I get it. But actually this pertains to your daughter, Mark, and whenever we're talking about like my hobbies or interests, she calls them little, and I don't know why, but it's just shattering. So
She says all your hobbies are little.
So I'll say like, I'm going to go out in the garage. Like, oh, you're going to work on your little podcast? It's a normal sized podcast. There's nothing little about it. It's fine. Like, you're going to play your little guitar? Like, I'm going to play an average sized guitar. It's normal. Like, I'm pretty good at it. It shatters me.
Your little hobbies.
My little hobbies. My little
you go
podcast.
hang out with your little friends.
Go hang out with your little friends.
Your little
Definitely what she
friends.
says.
You're going to go do your little workout in the garage? Yeah, I feel you. That could be frustrating for sure.
It's an adult sized workout.
Dude, this is speaking of adult size, I'm like super proud of this hobby that we have.
No, this is great.
That's why it's fun to share it with you today.
Yeah.
Welcome, dude. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Your claim to fame is that how long were you in the Air Force?
I was in the Air Force for 22 years, not counting 4 years at the Air Force Academy. So 4 years at the Air Force Academy, and then 22 active duty, and then retired. So I wanted to retire at 20, and because of 9/11, I was told I couldn't because they needed pilots. So I spent an extra 2 years flying airplanes for the Air Force.
Was that called stop loss at the time?
It was called stop loss.
Still is, right?
I think it is.
Well, dude, thank you for doing that because that's a really big deal. And I mean, how about this question? Do you remember what it felt like? You were still in the military when 9/11 happened?
Yeah, that's probably one of 3 or 4 things that I remember exactly where I was when
Tell
I
me
found
everything.
out about it. I was actually, my oldest daughter, Megan, she was in the band and she was in all the AP classes, but she had to have PE, and so she had to have PE before school started. So I would drive her to her PE class on the way, drop her off, and then go out to the base to go to work. And we were about halfway there, and we had the radio station on, and all they were talking about was, one of the towers going down. The second tower had not gone down yet. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but I remember telling Megan, but something really bad just happened. Mm-hmm. And, and I knew it was going to affect me probably.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question when something, and at that point, I didn't know for sure that it was a terrorist. It could have been because they just said airplanes on the radio. They didn't
Right.
say it was a 737 or a 757 or whatever kind of airplane it was. But again, that as soon as it happened, I go, well, that's going to affect me and my family. So
Yeah.
and it obviously affected the whole country.
Right.
So
Is there anything comparable during your service where something happened via like the news or anything like that, and you're like, oh my God, this means that I'm gonna have to do X, Y, and Z?
when a lot of the stuff that happened, so my initial airplane out of pilot training was a C-130, which had a combat role, and when I first got into the 130, the wall was still up, so everything was about supporting Europe and
Talking about Germany.
yeah, Germany, and so each C-130 squadron would have to deploy over there for 65 days a year, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. But during that time, there was no Panamas, there was no little things going on really, and it was, to be honest, fun.
Okay.
We had a job, but in some ways, the whole deal with two superpowers faced off against one another, there was no wars, or not as many. I shouldn't say
Right.
no. That all changed halfway through my second tour in the 130. We went into Iraq. I was at the schoolhouse at the time, but like the whole nation, we all watched it on TV.
Right.
I mean, it was incredible. They had the embedded reporters and stuff. But again, I didn't really find out about it any sooner than what everybody else found out
Right.
about it. But again, I had neighbors that were over there, and I told you yesterday, they were part of the Norman Schwarzkopf move to the north. They'd haul all the tanks and all the equipment and all the people up north, and then they came on around, and they were all part of that. A couple of my next door neighbors were, and then several of the people that I trained, as soon as they were trained, off they go. I'm sitting back there in Little Rock
Yeah.
training. So, but later on, a lot of stuff did start happening after the wall came down. The same neighbor that went to fight in Iraq, he was part of the Rio Hato Panama airdrop, which and he took a 37 millimeter through his fuel tank. But lots of times if you're not involved, it's hush hush. We find out at the same time that you guys do.
Right.
But if I'm in the schoolhouse, I know pretty much that I'm not going to immediately get involved. If I get involved in it, it's gonna go a long time, several years before I'm out of that assignment, because they're
Right.
gonna need new people.
Right.
So
And then I feel like this could be a false memory, but help me. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but did you have any fear after 9/11 that perhaps your role was going to change from flying to something more combative on the ground?
Well, so here's what happened. I came back from Japan. I was stationed over there for 4 years flying a C-9. And when I came back to the KC-10. When I left the KC-10, I was a qualified instructor pilot. So I was going to come back and become an instructor pilot. Well, I was back from Japan for 3 days when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
So, and again, going back to your question about what do you remember a news thing, and I go, wow. And here's the bad thing for me. It turned out it didn't matter, but the day before that happened, I had gone into the commander and said, listen, I'm retiring at 20 years. That's a year and 10 months from now. I'm not trying to get promoted. I was a lieutenant colonel. You don't need to waste any bullets on me. I'll do a good job. And that's it. Well, the next day this thing happens. I was thinking, oh crap. I could be on the ground in Afghanistan, because I've already given away all my cards,
Right.
But they needed pilots. They couldn't do that right away. So
Thankfully.
but the first place that some of our people went to, and I basically helped kick everybody out the door because I had to get requalified in the airplane. But one of the first places we went to was Al Udeid, which now is it's the biggest base in the Middle East. It's the command for the Middle East, and CENTCOM, I think it's called. I don't know. Those names have probably changed 4 times since I retired.
Sure.
But at the time, there was nothing there. Our booms and our flight engineers, the enlisted guys, were walking a fence line with M16s.
Right.
Very unusual for Air Force people.
For sure.
Very unusual.
Yeah. Because
So-
you guys are usually chilling in some spots that are a little bit more calm.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
for
have
sure.
chow halls and bunks.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
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 But those guys, some of them called back and they said, we feel like we're in the Army.
Yeah.
So,
Man, I'm speaking from my experience. I mean, I'm not obviously was not an officer in the Air Force as a pilot, but I can only imagine the frustration that was going on in your mind after 9/11. It's like, not only did the country get attacked, but now this is going to affect my career, my family, like you said. I mean, having kids during all that, like that's just that's very intense.
it is. And, once I got requalified, basically was in the Air Force for almost another 4 years after I came back from Japan. And I was probably deployed for probably at least 2.5 of that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's
So now
Wow.
it wouldn't be like the Army or the Marines where it would be a year at a time. Usually it was 3 or 4 months at a time. And then we come home for a couple weeks and then back we go. But, your wife is at that point is a single mom.
yeah.
Now, to be honest, since I became an airline pilot, I didn't know that I was going to do that. I thought I'd become a teacher and a coach like you guys. But I talked myself out of that. And at the time, because 9/11 destroyed the airline industry, really,
Yep.
there was no jobs to be had in that industry anyway. So, in fact, I kept the job that I had, waiting for better times. So there were some good things that came out of it for me just for timing. I don't want to say good things, but
I know. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
You were fortunate.
I was fortunate
Yeah.
that I hadn't already gotten out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there was people that had gotten out, and then all of a sudden the airlines say no.
So, and we learned in the
Timing's everything.
when we were soldiers that the whole stop loss idea came after Vietnam because of how bad the draft went over in America. You guys both as veterans, like, how do you guys feel about stop loss? Like, do we understand it like as a necessary evil that we'd rather keep guys in that are already trained than initiate the draft, or you served your time and you deserve to get out? Because I don't really know where I stand on it.
Well, go ahead.
I mean, a couple things. So I think I would prefer a stop loss over a draft.
Me too.
First of all, I understand it conceptually from the government's perspective of like, dude, we already trained you guys and we don't want to have to just get brand new people to go through basic and all these different things.
And you were at Intel, like the idea of having to get another guy top secret clearance.
Right.
On something
That's like $50,000
Yeah, it's like,
right there
cool.
just to get that. So what they did do by the time that I came around was if you signed up for 4, you signed up for 4 active and then 4 inactive. And that was their way of saying like, hey, after you do your 4, you're technically inactive,
Cool.
but you can be called
Yeah.
back. So it was more of like, hey,
You're on
right
call.
up front, like just this might happen. Just know that rather than them being kind of blindsided by stop loss. But I mean, it's touchy. I mean,
It is touchy. And of course, Spencer and I, neither one of us served when the draft was going on,
Right.
but it created such ill will from the public that I don't think it's possible to do that again.
I don't think so.
Probably right.
And so the other thing I would say is I'm actually still an inactive reserve.
There you go.
Really?
If you do your 20 years, they still have the right to call you back.
Oh, that's right.
And so, and I don't know what the rules are.
Right.
I think the odds of it, especially as I get older, I'm 63, the odds of it happening are very minimal. Even for somebody that's 45 and just retired, I think the odds are minimal, but it's possible.
For sure.
And, but I've also got a paycheck for life. And so it's imperfect, but I can't think of a better system. I don't know that there's a perfect system. So
Yeah. It's already, I mean, just, I know I think we can both talk about this, but it's unlike school where people can kind of talk themselves out of certain things, like in college or even at work, at jobs. But when it comes to the military and there's like contracts involved, I mean, you do as you're told.
Right.
Sure.
There's not a lot of
Yeah.
debate
Nope.
in the military,
Nope.
which it also serves its purpose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We got heavy here. This is good.
Real fast.
That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, so more context for listeners. So we're doing this Masters of Air series. This is kind of like part 1.5, right? Like an extra for part 1. We were talking to Mark about it, and we were talking about 12 O'Clock High and like these old movies that are like essentially primary sources because they use all this original footage in it. And then Mark bought 12 O'Clock High, and then we ate ribs and watched it, and it was lovely.
It was splendid. It was a really good night.
It's a good movie.
It's
Yeah.
extremely good. Highly recommend.
So let's watch some of it first. Let's just watch a little clip of it. Let's
do
show the people what it's about. So for context of the movie, this is 12 O'Clock High. It was made in 1949, and all of like the aerial footage, or at least most of the combat footage, is real. And what I didn't learn until today when I was doing more research on it is that some of the aerial footage is from the Allies, and some of it's also German
No shit.
Air Force footage that they got after, because it was built. They made it in '49, so they had access to some of that footage,
Whoa.
which I didn't realize. It's kind of crazy.
That is crazy. Also won an Academy Award for sound editing.
Sound editing's phenomenal in it.
Yeah, and then like a supporting act. It was like and we were also learning about this yesterday, that one of the biggest deals about this movie, it was very novel in the United States to have a war movie that was not propaganda.
Yeah.
So that was refreshing and interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about it, but let's watch a little bit. So we're gonna watch the first. This is one of the final like combat scenes, and what we're gonna watch first is these B-17, B-24 bombers. They're gonna go up and they're gonna like take down a German fighter, which is just crazy to watch because this footage is real. And then we're also going to watch them drop a shitload of bombs, which is just like, and I know that they're reusing footage, but it's still just wild to watch.
FWs, 3 o'clock. On your toes, high squadron, low squadron, here they come. 12 o'clock high.
That's the name of the movie.
Heading for the high squadron.
All right, so that's the first part. So
Pretty intense.
yeah, listeners, if you aren't watching this, what just happened was a bunch of bombers with turrets just shot down a German fighter, and it was wild.
It was wild. And that's legit footage.
That's legit footage as far as I know. And even I think the bullet holes going into the plane, that may not be legit, but we read other accounts in Masters of the Air where another documentary director, Wiley, he was trying to get footage of those things happening, and when he missed one, he started screaming, and they had to like restrain him because he wanted them to go back into German fire and re-get a flak shot like against them. He wanted to re-get damage onto their plane, and they were like, "We're not going to do that, obviously," and he freaked out on them, and so they sat on him.
Yeah. I also remember a scene in the Masters of the Air book where the filmmakers, while they were in the air, it's freezing cold. It is absolutely freezing cold. That's just why they had like suits that would heat them up and stuff like that. But this dude had to bring multiple cameras because while he was shooting, it would freeze, and then he would have to put it in his jacket to let it thaw, and then take out the other one that was not frozen and start filming with that one.
Crazy.
It's just incredible what lengths people went to try and get these shots. It's like, it reminds me of what people do now to get shots for something far less on their cell phones. But this is, a whole operation.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to watch them drop a bunch of bombs real quickly, and then we'll talk about what we thought about this movie.
Dropping bombs.
Bombay doors open.
He's going to use the Norden bomb sight. Pickle jar.
Carnage.
Did you see the Norden bomb sight? He's looking over it.
Yeah, it's
that's
really
crazy.
Cool.
Okay, so that's 12 o'clock high. Let's
12
talk about
o'clock high.
it.
Well, so what's your relationship with this movie? Tell when was the first time you saw this?
Well, the first time I saw it, it was required that we watch it when I was at the Air Force Academy. So it was during basic training for us. So it was in the first summer that we were there. And of course, most of us were half starved and very tired. And so most people were trying to just get some sleep in the movie. But it was a good movie, and it was taught. So they would run, this is all action footage, which is fascinating to watch and cool to watch. But in our classroom, it was the leadership that was taught, and it's a great story about leadership. And they run a 20-minute clip, and then one of the teachers would talk about, okay, what's the commander trying to do here? Why did the general do this? What can we learn from that? And so it was a teaching movie for the Air Force Academy. I don't know if they still do it. I think they probably do, but it was more than 40 years ago for me now.
Yeah.
So
significant.
But I did remember when Kevin and Spencer were starting to talk about this particular lesson, I remembered that I'd watched it, and I remembered I liked the movie. It is a good movie. It's a great movie. You should watch it.
Absolutely. And the general premise of the movie is that, I forget the guy's name, Savage is what he is in the movie. He's representing or based off of the character Armstrong, who led the first series of attacks. And he gets sent to an Air Force base for the 8th Air Force that is just doing real bad. Morale's really low. They loved their last general, and their last general cared too much about them. And so he broke because he couldn't handle all the casualties because the casualties are so brutal. Then you just get these great conversations where you have this hard-ass Savage, and he's trying to get everybody in line, and the doctor is saying all these great things they're not yellow, but they can't fight. And those are big deal things that are in the book that we're reading. And
yeah.
Anyway, at the end, if I remember, because we didn't watch the variants, I had to read about all the end, but I believe that Savage then has his own breakdown because it turns out he cares about his men too much too, just like the last guy.
Nobody's machines.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all people. So.
Yeah.
And I read a New York Times review from 1950 on it, which was fascinating in itself. Yeah. And the line that I liked the best from it was Mr. Peck, which is the actor who plays Savage.
Gregory Peck, yeah.
So Mr. Peck does an extraordinarily able job in revealing the hardness and the softness of a general exposed to peril, which I think captures the movie very well. This general is incredibly hard on all of the guys and incredibly soft at the same time because he just wants them to succeed and not die, but he can't tell them that, right? Because then they'd be too soft. And he's they're men, they're not boys. They kept saying that in the movie.
What's the part where he's about to cry? Remember where he's at his desk?
That's because he thought he was going to get investigated by the inspector general.
Okay.
And then the guy, he was going to let the young pilot that was going to receive the Medal of Honor leave, and the guy didn't take his transfer, so he had to turn around and look out the window
yeah, that was
stoically
that was
cry.
A good scene. That was a good scene. So for you, every branch seems to have these movies that like define their branch. I'm sure for the Navy, it's probably Top Gun. Probably for the Marines, it's probably Full Metal Jacket. Maybe it's different for everybody. What would you say is a movie that makes you like get all hopped up on being like proud of your Air Force service? Do you have one?
I'll tell you what it is. Well, you go first, then I'll tell you the real.
You tell me what it is, because I don't think I have one.
It's Independence Day. Before Mark lights his barbecue, he says it's time to kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
Let's go. Okay. Even though Will Smith was a Marine.
Was he a Marine?
Will Smith.
Yeah.
Was
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's a Marine pilot. I actually, I don't know if I could say there's a movie. That movie might be it, or 12 O'Clock High, but I like the second Top Gun a lot because I think they had a mission. Yeah. They had, and of course it's Navy, so it's not Air Force.
Yeah.
But and if you look, there's not that many Air Force movies. There's a lot more Navy movies than there are Air Force movies. Even going back to the Battle of Midway, and there's just a lot more aviation stories about Navy pilots, I think, than Air Force pilots. But I like the second Top Gun movie because I like the mission, and
I love that
and some of the flying was spectacular. I'd never seen any of the fifth generation. And I have a friend who also flies at Southwest Airlines that flew the what's the big? I can't even think of the Raptor. What is it? The F-22.
F-22 Raptor.
Yeah, and I asked him, can those things really do that? Because in that Top Gun movie, it looks like they can almost pivot. Mm-hmm. And he goes, they can, but if you're in that position, it's your last gasp because you've lost all your energy.
Right.
So if you miss, you're dead.
Yep.
So I don't know how useful it was, but the flying scenes in that movie were pretty good, I thought. So
that movie was incredibly entertaining.
It was.
I was so satisfied by that movie. It's not even funny. Yeah. I think when I think of Air Force movies, I feel like those Transformer movies really, like, there's a lot of Air Force in those
There's
movies.
a lot of Air Force.
A-10s and yeah.
I once spoke to a guy at Costco who had like a Air Force like motorcycle jacket thing, and he had all these Air Force patches, and we were talking about deployment. He was like, I knew I was deployed to Qatar when I met Michael Bay. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I think also like we're watching these because I had known about these films not because of military history, because I wasn't into military history before Spencer, but because of Star Wars. And so I knew that they used to watch this old stuff all the time. Like these are always quoted in like early Star Wars. And then when Rian Johnson came back and he did The Last Jedi, he watched 12 O'Clock High all the time for it.
Really?
So if you watch the turret gunners, it's the Millennium Falcon. It's Luke going around the Millennium Falcon shooting down TIE fighters. Like that's all. It even looks like the same like TIE fighter little bulb thing that they had.
Interesting.
You are a nerd.
I'm just a nerd for life. I told you I know what I am.
You said you are a nerd.
Yeah. Okay. There's some cool things that happen. I like in the movie too, their little twist on it. Because all the airplanes we talked about in the Air Force is the only place where you could like decorate your airplane. And they have two like movie based ones that I think are fun. One is in front of the door to, I don't know who's B-17, but it says, what angels and generals fear to tread here. That's dope because that goes along with what Miller talks about in the book all the time, that there is nobody of higher authority than the pilot in those airplanes. Like they do not care what a general says. If your pilot says something, you're going to do what that pilot says in that moment, which is kind of cool. And then the other one says leper colony, which is great.
Leper colony was good.
Yeah. Okay, I also didn't know, Mark, you were telling us, because in the beginning of the movie, they were shooting flares. Can you explain the shooting flares thing? Because that was like pretty interesting.
Well, I can't say I know for sure, but you need to know where the wind's coming from to land the airplane effectively. And as soon as I saw the flares, you know where the wind's coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and these days, even in small air stations up on the Arctic that support radar sites, they'll have some guy out there trained with an anemometer that can give you stuff. But back in those days, it was a flare.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and then that plane crashes, and I think that was a real plane crash that someone just caught on camera.
it probably was.
It like takes out a barn. It's bad.
Well, I thought it took out 2 tents, and I'm like,
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, it's not good.
yeah, no, it's not. So, but I don't know. It's interesting looking at. I mean, it's not really a big part of the movie, but when the guy that finds the mug goes out to the old airfield and he's walking on the grounds and stuff, I'm like, that would be pretty nostalgic for somebody to go back and see that. I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I've had uncles go back to Vietnam since they got drafted.
I always am constantly thinking about like how crazy it would be in my lifetime if Afghanistan becomes peaceful.
Yeah.
If I would be able to go back and just check it out from a
Right.
peaceful perspective.
Yeah. Go back to
Certainly,
Friendship Gate and everything.
I mean, Vietnam has become a big vacation spot for
Yeah.
Americans to go back and visit and see. And
There's a lot of trauma on both sides. People are trying to get over it, you know?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Because when we were talking about the stop loss, I was thinking of like the Vietnam draft like decimated my family. Like
Yeah.
it really did. Like
That's really
so
sad.
many of my uncles were in it, and then so many of like the drama still like is going on about it. Like
It's a
Well,
tragedy.
unbelievable stories.
yeah. I mean, all the PTSD,
Yeah.
which wasn't called PTSD
Right.
then.
Right.
Until-
Shell
I mean,
shock.
yeah, shell shock, and I mean, the Agent Orange, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just the napalm. There's no way you can. It's going to destroy people
Yeah.
and lives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that one thing that I hope people start to understand is, when you see these Vietnam vets on the streets and all these repercussions of Vietnam that we're still talking about right now, right? And, you have Iraq and Afghanistan and all these like veterans who have to get treatment for their PTSD. I just hope that the message to the people who decide to go to war realize that even when the war is done, you're still paying for it. Like you're paying for it with people's lives, but also with money. I mean, now these veterans have to get taken care of. Now they might want to go to school, right? This is all money. War is such an incredibly expensive, long-lasting thing.
Look at you turning into a little economist.
I'm just saying, like
it is.
it's just
we
crazy.
paid for it for years, emotionally and financially.
Yeah, it's wild. And also the families, like how
Yeah.
you were saying earlier, how when 9/11 happened, you're like, oh, this is gonna affect my family. And how you were telling me last night, like your wife would become a single mom, and I think people don't realize that even when a service member deploys, like the family is deployed too.
It's a different life.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gone.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard.
What kind of stuff did you do when you were deployed? Like what would you do to blow off some steam?
Well, so by the time I went to LUD, it was built up. And so out of that 2.5 years or so that I was deployed, probably 75% of that was to Diego Garcia, which was out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's a beautiful atoll in the south. It's about equal distance between India, Australia, and the east coast of Africa. So that's kind of where it's located. But for me, it was a British-owned island run by the Navy, and the Air Force had about 98% of the people on it. And the people that were on that island during the whole battle were bombers and tankers. And so sometimes it was hot. You didn't have time to do anything. But the great thing about Diego Garcia is, the Navy had a great MWR facility there. I learned how to sail.
really?
Cool.
I caught barracudas and other bottom fish, and flayed them out and barbecued them. Of course, there's times when you don't have time for that. It would go hot and then it would go cold. But
Right.
I had plenty of opportunities, more than the people at Al Udeid or Al Dhafra, to do fun things. I always tried to work out, and I will say that even Al Udeid, not at first, because it was so bare base. It was, it was nothing was there. But once it gets built up, the Air Force and the Army and whoever, I don't know about the Army and the Marine, but the Air Force throws. There's weight rooms, there's treadmills, there's
Basketball courts.
courts, and so it's a great opportunity to get in shape, to be honest, and that's what I would usually try to do. The funnest thing I ever saw, I never got to do it because I didn't want to stand in line for it, was I was out at Diego, and they had one room that was all computers on LAN, and they were all playing Medal of Honor.
Nice.
And oh my God, these guys were screaming at one another, and if their guy got shot, it was like they got shot, and it was a big release for people.
Sure.
I think the military tries to make that work, and if you're in the right place, you can. But most Air Force guys are on a base that can do that sort of stuff. If you're an Army or a Marine guy out in a foxhole, good luck.
Yeah.
That's a different life.
For sure.
So I think that's why it's easier to recruit in the Air Force than it is in the Army and the Marines. Although I would say that I think the Marine Corps is, to me, they're really known as the badasses. I think the hardcore people want to go to the Marine Corps because it is hard. Hoorah, all that stuff. I don't know if that's you're the Marine. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that. So as from my perspective, I told myself that if I was going to join the military, I wanted to do all or nothing at all.
Right.
And the Marine Corps was going to give me that military experience that I, as a 17-year-old, was looking for. But all branches have their jobs, and all branches have their badasses, and we're all part of the same team.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Would you say that, I've been listening to for a while now kind of talk about your Air Force Academy experience, and it sounds like you enjoyed it probably about as much as I would have enjoyed it, which is pretty much zero, right?
Yeah. Correct.
What would you say, hindsight being 2020, and I understand that you're very grateful for the life that you've lived and all that, but if you could go back and talk to young Mark, what's the other route you think you would have taken if it wasn't the Air Force Academy?
Well, I think that I probably would be a teacher and a coach, just like you guys. My parents were both teachers and coaches, and I thought I had a great life as a kid. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had fun.
Yeah.
And so I think teaching has changed. I think coaching has changed too. But I probably would have ended up somewhere in there. I think I told you, the only reason I went to the Air Force Academy was because it was the only Division I school that recruited me to play basketball. And I'm sure, I was one of their last choices, but the 6'9" guys went to North Carolina and not to the Air Force Academy. So I was recruited and I went there, and had I not been recruited by the Air Force Academy, I probably would not. I probably wouldn't have even had any interest to go. To be honest. So, but they got a career out of me.
Yep.
So I can't say that it was a bad investment for them.
Right.
But I didn't enjoy it. I worked hard. I wasn't. I'm a smart guy, but some of those people were brilliant.
Right.
And I had to work very hard. I was a civil engineer in school, and then I was playing basketball, and I was working my ass off.
Yeah.
I was tired.
Yeah.
And in many ways resentful.
That I understand. That I get.
So I feel like I missed all the better parts of college that other people have. And so it's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy where I am now, for sure. So
yeah, Mark and I were talking about that last night, and I think it was actually really comforting to hear you say that, because I myself, to this day, when I hear other people talking about their college experiences, I just get so I don't know, like disappointed in myself, I guess, a little bit, where I'm just like, man, that sounds like a really good time.
I one of the lines I used with you last night was, I think it would have taken more courage for me to quit than to stay, because I made the decision, and I'm stubborn, and I don't want to admit that I made an error in going there.
Right.
And so I think, I don't know if I would have been happier in life. I'm pretty happy where I am right now in life. So I don't know that I could say that I'd be happier, but I know I would have enjoyed that 4 years more than I enjoyed my 4 years that I had there. So
it's fair.
So.
Okay, everyone's favorite moments or lines from 12 O'Clock High. Do you guys all memorize your favorite lines? I got mine. I'll start us off. What you guys think about it? So I like when it was one of the captains or one of the generals talking to the one they're asking about his diet of coffee and cigarettes. And he's like, "When's the last time you changed your pants, man?" And he said, "Never mind my pants. What about my crew?" I just love it.
That was my favorite.
That was the old commander.
Yeah, that was the old
fired,
commander.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also probably my favorite as well.
It was so much
That
fun.
was great.
I don't have any lines memorized. So
All
I
right.
can't
Do you have a favorite part? Like, is there a part that because you've watched it a couple times now?
Yeah. Well, and I love the aerial footage.
Yeah.
But my favorite part is kind of a sad part. It's the end of the movie when the new commander that whipped the boys into
Yep.
shape, he breaks down.
Yeah.
I think that's sad, but I think I think that can happen.
Yep.
It's the human part of it.
It is.
Right.
We're not all machines.
Right.
We just aren't.
Yeah.
It's
So-
pretty fascinating that they made this movie so quickly after World War II, and like they tried to take such a critical look at it. It's
crazy.
pretty nuanced. Like
Yeah.
they're not talking about they're separating. Like we're not talking about shell shock infantry guys in trenches because that's different. We're talking about guys who are not cowards but who've hit their limit on being able to do this task. Like this is complicated for general audiences to swallow and like digest. I like it.
Yeah, I straight up told. I don't remember when I told you this, but relatively recently, I told Kevin I would have absolutely rather been infantry than been in those planes.
Yeah,
Like hands down.
it
It's
does.
so
It is
terrifying.
crazy that they're not pressurized.
It's so terrifying.
Well, I mean, and it depends on the battle, but the odds going over Dresden that you were going to come back were not very good.
No, they were not.
I mean, you would know those numbers. You've studied them, but I know they're not good.
They're not good.
The opening scene when the guys are coming back and that airplane takes
Yep.
out the 210s and they lost almost 1/4 of the airplanes that day.
Yep.
And I don't know how many people were on that on those crews. I think it was 10 or 11 if you count all the gun turrets
Yep.
and the navigator and the 2 pilots and that's a lot of people right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but if you're an Iraqi soldier in a tank and you see an A-10 coming, I don't think I want to be that guy either.
Right,
That's
that's true.
fair.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
say because I would rather be. So there's this is a nice spectrum for me to think about. Maybe would rather be infantry allies, but I would rather be in those airplanes every day instead of being on any of the Eastern Front because they're losing like 20 million men,
That's fair.
and that doesn't seem great on either side of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Germany committing atrocities all the way into Russia, and then Russia paying back every atrocity on the way back. That's just horrible.
Yeah.
The Ostfront, is that what it's called? I think
Have
it's
you guys
called.
done one on the Eastern Front?
It's so sad. Like I can't.
Not
I've
yet, no.
I've done some research on it, but every time I read, I'm like, there's no jokes here. Like, it's just brutal.
Nothing funny about this.
Because it's seriously Germany committing war crimes
Yeah.
the whole way up, and then Russia committing war crimes the whole way back, and then like there's scenes where like a German officer will be on a train and everyone in Germany's freaking out, and then he's like, "Everyone, shut up! If they pay back even a fraction of the shit that we did, it's not gonna be good." And then no one talks on the train for the next 2 days as they try to escape. Like it's brutal.
Yeah, that is brutal.
No, thank you.
No, I'm good off all that. Wait, so I'm going to pivot a little bit. Excuse me. Cut that out.
Oh my god, I'm leaving it.
You went to SERE training, right?
Yes.
Dude, can you tell us about anything that they did as far as like psychological warfare to try and break you down in SERE training?
Can you explain what SERE training is first?
Yeah, you want to tell us what SERE training
well,
is?
SERE training, we call it SERE. The initials are SERE, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. That's what the 4 letters stand for. And so it's a 3-week program. When I was at the academy people taught it. And fellow cadets taught it. The upperclassmen taught it. So that was taught in between our freshman and sophomore year. It was intense. They've taken it away from the cadets, I think, because they've had some instances where
This is Stanford prison experiment kind of stuff. Yeah.
bad things happen, and so it's done now up in the Spokane area, out in the forest out there. But some parts I enjoyed. Survival, evasion was fun because you got to orienteer, and you had to find checkpoints to check in with your people. The prison part was not fun. I mean,
Yeah, I imagine
that was just
terrible.
And the interrogations, even though that you know that they are not real, it's still not fun.
Yeah.
And I can see how, I mean, even in a academic situation, it's just no fun.
Yeah.
My third summer, so the first summer was basic, second summer was SERE and a couple other programs. My third summer, I was an interrogator. So I was trained to interrogate.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
You should have seen him before I proposed. It was brutal.
Are you being serious?
No.
Oh.
Mark is like the sweetest
That
guy.
would have been a super fun story.
So, and I don't think that I could do as well as an interrogator or somebody up at Spokane that does it day in and day out.
Right.
They're intel guys that are trained to do that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's another reason they took the program away from the academy and just put it permanently up there. But it was interesting from that end also. Some of the things that they did to you was they'd lock you in these little boxes.
Yeah, I've heard about
And it's just no fun at all. I mean, it's claustrophobic. You just have to. I mean, I didn't know how to do yoga then. If I was in one now, I'd just practice doing yoga.
Yeah.
The funniest thing I saw was when I was one of the interrogators. And the boxes were all the same size. So if you were 5'4" or you were 6'4", is the same box. And
That's the most military sentence I've heard.
And-
Even when we interrogate, everyone's the same size.
so
equity.
we had this big, huge football player. I mean, he was. If you've watched Reacher on Amazon, then he looked like Reacher. He's just gigantic.
Okay.
And they shove him into this box and have to lean against the door to shut it.
Yeah.
In about 5 or 6 minutes, all of a sudden, all you hear is, "Rah!" and the whole box comes apart.
Yeah. He flexed and busted out of there.
He
That's
busted
awesome.
out of there.
That's great. That's the dream.
That's cool.
It was funny, although at first everybody's scared. What's this guy going to do?
Yeah, that's funny.
But I think that was the worst thing. I think it depends on your personality to some degree.
Sure.
I like to tell the story about myself and my brother. If I got in trouble, I didn't want to get spanked. They'd send me to my room. Fine, I'm not coming out. I'll sit in my room and read forever. You put my brother in his room, and 3 minutes later, I'll do anything you want.
Just let me out.
Just let me out.
Yeah.
So I was fine, locked up by myself. But I don't like pain, I guess, is the story there. But I think it depends on your personality. What's worse for you?
Yeah, what's the leverage?
Yeah. What's your leverage? And that's all about the interrogator figuring out what the leverage is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would say, I don't know.
I have a question. I bombard Mark with questions all the time now that I've started the podcast. But I have one I think I haven't really asked you, which is, how has like the role of the navigator in the airplane changed over because during your inception it would have been completely different from how it was when you left, right?
Yeah. And in fact, there's not a lot of navigators anymore.
That's what I
that are
mean.
pure navigators.
Yeah.
So when I started flying the C-130, I was one airplane I flew at Little Rock was actually older than I was. I was born in 1961. There's one 1960 model
Oh, interesting.
at Little Rock. At the time, INSs were just coming online. So for us to navigate, say, across the ocean when we were going over to Europe, we had what was called a Doppler. We had an Omega, which there are stations all around the world. It's kind of like a Loran, if you know what that is, which didn't work very well over the North Atlantic. And then we had a navigator in the back who we had a sextant port, and he would shoot cell going across. So that's true navigation.
Right.
And I didn't go through nav school, obviously, but when they go through nav school, when I went through, when I was in the military, there's kind of two tracks. And one track was the true navigator, is what I would say, navigating across the Pacific or the Atlantic using a sextant, or doing low level, because the 130 did low level airdrop, and the captain would usually fly, or the aircraft commander would usually fly, and the first officer or the co-pilot and the navigator would be reading charts at 300 feet, which there's some skill involved in that.
I bet.
Yes.
I bet.
So you know, the 130 isn't the fastest airplane in the world, but at 300 feet at 230 or 240 knots, it's going by pretty fast.
I imagine.
And so, and then the other track was the fighter track, and those guys, you know, if you watch Top Gun and you watch Goose and you watch, I forget the guy's name in the second one, that's kind of the nerd.
Goose 2.0.
Yeah. Goose 2.0. You know, those guys are handling weapon systems, radars, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a different job.
Okay.
But in the 130, I to tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I think in the special ops they still exist, but I think in the slick 130s anymore, I think it's all done with GPS. I mean,
It's a computer.
it's computerized.
It's kind of sad, you know?
Yeah, it
Because
is.
in the 8th Air Force, they were having to do like dead reckoning sometimes too.
Yeah.
You know, they were looking out at the waves and they're like,
Right.
all right, let's just figure out where I think we are. Like, just dead reckon this and then look on a map and try to figure it out. Like, that's pretty amazing that they
Right.
could do that on a plane in a storm going to Greenland. Like, that's, I don't know. I can't really fathom that.
For sure. That was the one thing that I've been realizing with Masters of the Air is like, oh, navigating is a terrifying job. It's like,
Yeah, over
it's
the
like, where
open
are we?
ocean.
It's like, oh, yeah, that's my job. We have to know where we are all because of me. That just sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah. You know, I can remember going across the Atlantic, and there's some terrible things about that back then because everything, all your communication is in HF radio. And if you listen to a HF stands for, I think it stands for high frequency.
Yeah.
And it bounces radio waves off the atmosphere. And when you receive it, it's, and then you piece together a few words. And you communicate that way. So you have to listen to that all the way. And we kind of would take turns doing that. And, you know, obviously you get up and go to the back. And one time I got up and I had a brand new second lieutenant navigator, first time going across the Atlantic by himself. And he's back there. The sweat's pouring off. And we're going across at night because they could shoot three things. During the day, you could shoot two things, the moon and the sun.
Yeah.
At night, you could shoot a star.
Okay.
Which was more accurate, but it was more work. They had to, and those guys were working hard. And I walked back, and you know, I typically would plot 3 plots from the, and I'd look back there, and that plot's getting a little larger, you know.
Yeah.
And they're sweating it out, you know. So I don't think I ever felt like I was going to get lost, but you could get violated by air traffic control if you got too far off your track.
Yeah.
Because they can't see it. So they don't, if you get too far off the track, you might hit somebody.
Yep.
Because there's no radar. So those guys took it seriously and they worked hard at it. But now I think they're all gone.
Yeah, I was like, what did they all
when I
get
fly-
transferred to other division, like other jobs?
Yeah. Yes, and some of them special ops airplanes still have them. I don't know if the EMCs and the ACs have them still. There's a bunch of different models of C-130, but there's not very many of them anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a lost art. I think it's fascinating.
I
would
agree.
I would actually like to learn how to do it.
I would too.
Yeah.
After I first learned that like the Maori were able to do that to travel open ocean trading, and like that's incredible. Like I
Extremely
didn't imagine people could do that. I didn't.
Yeah.
You know, it's just amazing to me now because when I fly a 737 now, and again, when we used to go VOR to VOR, or we had a navigator and we'd be navigating across the ocean. I mean, if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time and at co-altitude, you'd still probably miss them because the accuracy of the navigation was so poor. But these days, when I go to Hawaii after 4 hours, we still plot, but we plot off 2 GPSs, 2 IRSs, which are gyros basically,
Sure.
and then we collect some other data too. But I mean, we can measure how far we're off the line, and sometimes we're as little as 50 feet off that line.
That's crazy.
With the accuracy of the GPS and the accuracy of the INUs, it's shell shocking to me based on what I used to see in the 130 with navigators.
I bet.
So,
All right.
Go ahead.
I was to say thank you guys.
This
has been
it's
like
a big deal.
Yeah, this has been fascinating.
Well, it looks like we're reaching the beginning of the end here.
Yeah.
But for us scaredy pants out there, myself
Thank you.
included, give me one sentence that I can say to myself over and over again while I'm in the air that'll help me not be absolutely terrified that I'm going to die.
Flying is the safest form of transportation there is.
That's all I got to tell myself.
That's it.
It's the safer than a bicycle? Oh, probably by a lot.
By
Right?
a lot.
Yeah.
Safer than walking?
It's certainly safer than a car.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say a lot of things. I mean, there's great training. The unsafe thing about a car is you got 9 million other idiots out there that are driving like idiots. In flying, everybody has been well trained. They follow the rules. They have good judgment, or they don't make it. So I still think
you guys have the most intense regulatory organization that I've ever heard of in my entire life. Like, you complain about it sometimes because they are intense.
Yeah.
But it is nice as the person who travels to know that well, don't I hope that they don't figure out about this because they're gonna talk to you and they will.
Yeah. So,
you know what I want? I want a yoke. It doesn't have to do anything.
You know, a lot of the newer airplanes don't have yokes anymore.
Don't tell me that.
Or I mean, the fighters always just have the stick.
I'll take a stick.
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't have to do anything. It could be like my little toddler's, cozy coupe that has the steering wheel that doesn't do anything.
Even the F-16, which is a pretty old airplane now, it's a small stick over here on the side.
Oh my gosh!
Going like this. So
where's the fun? The yoke is fun.
It's more like what you fly, on your simulator out there, on your
PlayStation?
Xbox or PlayStation or whatever you got.
Oh, I've dabbled in Flight Simulator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's one entire challenge where you just land planes in different environments. It's actually really fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So,
well, Mark, you're the second military officer we've had on this show.
I don't know how much I added.
You added everything, dude. We appreciate
constantly underselling yourself, but we love you.
We absolutely appreciate, dude. Thank you, genuinely. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here, dude, and taking the time out of your day to, humor us with knowledge.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah,
dude, totally. And I say this to all the veterans that come on here, but on a relatively serious note, veterans are taking their lives 60 plus a day, and I don't know, man, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being. I'm glad you're still around.
Me too.
Because veterans go through a lot of pain upstairs mentally, and if you're allowed to not be okay, and if you're a veteran out there or anybody at all who's dealing with some things, just reach out and talk to people. So we're glad that you're still around, dude. It means the world, and thank you for coming on.
Raising Hannah, a big deal.
Yeah, dude, good job raising Hannah and the rest of your daughters.
Sometimes she sounds like she's pretty controlling.
Just a little.
Do your little hobby.
My little hobby.
His words. That's hilarious. Well, we have a little tradition here on Battle Buddies where when we sign off, we all together will say bonsai. Okay. So if you want to join us with that, all that we say is, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And until next time, bonsai.